All right. Hello, everyone. I welcome you all to this first impression session of the AILET paper. And very soon, I'm going to be joined by my students from across India, all the centers that we have. So we're already joined by people from the Delhi center, and we have two branches in Delhi, which is Pitampura and Connaught Place. So we have both of them. Then we have people from the Noida center joining us. We have students from the Hazratganj Lucknow Center and the Alambagh Lucknow Center. Students from Mumbai are joining us soon. And so are students from Chandigarh, Patna, and Ranchi. All right, so before we start this session, guys, first of all, the big burden is off your head today. You're done with the AILET exam. The first thing that I'm going to say, and which is something that I've been historically telling all my students, is that, again, like I said, historically speaking, the AILET has always been a difficult paper, but let not the nervousness of the AILET paper impact your CLAT paper. All right. So every time people come after the AILET paper, they're sort of, there are mixed emotions, and emotions are leaning more on the side of people being a little discouraged because the paper is, like I said, always a bit difficult. But let that not impact your CLAT performance. In all probability, the CLAT paper is, again, always easier than the AILET paper. So you're done with the paper, trust your preparation, you did a decent job, and now just forget about it and move on to the CLAT paper, which is going to be held on this coming Sunday. Coming to the first impression part of the paper, we are still collecting all the data. We have the paper. We have had a chat with around 100 students that have written the paper and have come to us with their feedback. The paper, to begin with, was a bit unorthodox and a bit unconventional. So this was not one of those traditional papers that you had. The pattern was jumbled. So this year, all those who are watching this session and have written the paper must have realized something, that logic and English was jumbled. Now, in a way, there are both pros and cons to it. So let us first come to the cons. The cons, obviously, is that it took people by surprise. It was a bit startling because there is one passage, and then on the same passage, you have a part A, which is asking you questions on English, which are basically nothing but reading comprehension questions. And then there is a part B, which is logic. The distribution of marks is pretty much standard, which is around 70 questions on logic and 50 questions, remainder questions on English, and then GK. But these questions, like I said, part A, part B from the same passage. So from English, we had those basic run-of-the-mill reading comprehension questions. And from logic, we have a mix. We have a mix of CR, which had both questions from inductive logic and deductive logic. And we also had a lot of AR questions, which is analytical reasoning questions as well, which again caught a lot of people by surprise because, again, for the past 3 or 4 years, the focus on AR was being lessened. But in this paper, from the sort of feedback that I have gotten, there were at least around 20 plus questions on AR. And these questions included blood relations and, seating arrangements and stuff like that. So again, the pros of the paper, and this is what I have been told by my team here, is that in a way, if you are getting both logic questions and English questions from the same passage, then the passage reading, the core reading that you have to do is sort of limited. So again, think of it this way. There are separate questions, separate passages for logic and separate passages for English. Now you have one passage, and therefore the reading time that you have to give to these passages in a way obviously becomes less. But that is not saying that the paper was not lengthy, because the unanimous feedback that we have gotten from students is that definitely the paper was lengthy. And as a direct result, as a direct impact of the paper being lengthy, the number of attempts are definitely hit. And therefore, we are still working on it. My team is solving the paper, but the cutoffs will be tad bit lower. They don't really go a lot down, but then of course, historically speaking, as compared to other AILET papers we've seen in the past, the cutoffs will be a bit lower because the paper was definitely lengthy, it was a bit tricky, it was a bit surprising, and which is why the number of attempts will be limited. The GK section has been a relief in the sense that most of these questions were pretty straightforward. Most of these questions were based on the current affairs from the past, maybe 1.5 years. And you had questions right from polity to sports to law. So legal, again, like I said, there were no reasoning questions on legal, but we did have a few GK questions based on law in the GK section. And some of these passages, again, were law based. So they were basically reading comprehension passages, the topic of which or the tone of which was something that has gotten something to do with law. But otherwise, legal reasoning per se is pretty much becoming redundant for the paper. AILET for the last year also did not have a single question on reasoning. This year also, there was no straightforward question on reasoning, so legal reasoning. So I think AILET has pretty much made up its mind not to ask legal reasoning, but then there are always surprises in the paper. For the longest time, we also felt that AR has become redundant, but doesn't look like the case this year. So one thing that I've always been telling my aspirants is that it's a bouncer. The Clat and the AILET, these are two bouncers, two fast bowlers, famous or rather infamous for their crazy bouncers. And so be prepared for all contingencies, and which is what we do here at Clat Possible as well. Irrespective of a certain trend, which is, let's say, become prominent for the past 3-4 years, we do not sort of quit teaching any section because, being in the business for almost 20 years now, we know that, these the CLAT and the AILET consortium both have a penchant for throwing bouncers every now and then. So this was a general feedback of the paper, and I think the best people to tell you more about the first impression and about what sort of a paper we had would be my students who've just come from their centers and are joining me now. So I have people from Pitampura, Connaught Place, Hazratganj, Chandigarh, Mumbai. So one by one, first I would like all my students to introduce themselves. So I will first come to CP Pitampura. Who do we have from CP Pitampura?
Hi, sir. We have Kamakshi and Vedahi.
All right. Welcome to the session. Then we have Connaught Place. Who do we have from Connaught Place?
Hello, sir. My name is Vaishnavi Chaudhary.
All right. Thank you so much. Karan, can you just work on the internet? I think the voice is not clear. Karan, moving on to Hazratganj. Who all do we have in Hazratganj? Please start identifying yourself, students. All right, before Ganj, I'll come to Chandigarh. So I have a lot of students from Chandigarh. Again, I remember most of you, but quickly for my viewers.
The Prabhat is online.
All right. Okay, all right, great. And we have Nityam Modi. Nityam, what center are you, which branch are you at right now?
So,
all right, and moving on to the Mumbai center. Who do we have at the Mumbai center? Please turn on your camera. Lubna, can you please ask the students to turn on the camera, Mumbai center?
Yeah, students haven't reached the center yet because they're quite far.
So they are I understand. Online. Mumbai, that's a problem. I can understand, obviously.
Yeah,
so we'll just wait for some time for the students to join us.
Huzefa is there. Huzefa is there.
All right, Huzefa is there. All right.
Yeah, Dhun is there. Dhun, Drishti, and Hitat. All three are together.
Lubna, can you turn on the cameras? Just turn on the cameras. All right. We have Dhun and Huzefa from the Mumbai center. All right. So let's start, since I can see that we have a lot of students from the Chandigarh center. Let's start with the first impression. So how are we dividing this section? We'll first start with the general impressions on after writing the paper. How did you feel? What was the paper like? The difficulty level? Then we will go to each and every section, and not a lot of sections. There are just 3 sections. There's logic, English, and GK. So we'll be taking your feedback on these respective sections. And then finally, we will have some discussion on, the attempts, good attempts. What do you think would be the cutoff? And at the end, we would also have a small discussion on, the center environment, what sort of glitches did you face, if any? All right, so let's start with Chandigarh. And I think I can see Gurnu sitting right in front, right? You're Gurnu.
Hi, sir.
Yes, Gurnu. General impression. What did you feel? The first thing that comes to your heart when I say AILET 2022.
Absurd and frivolous.
All right. Okay. Elaborate now. Tell me a little bit more.
So basically, sir, I started off with GK, and again, GK was a definite cakewalk. It was very easy compared to what we've been getting in our mods. It was really easy. However, again, the pattern change, it took me around 15-20 good minutes to sink in that, okay, the pattern has been changed. This is what I need to go ahead with, right? So then I just thought that, okay, because logical was very absurd. It was like this frivolous. So I started off with RC and then I moved on with the paper.
No, but Gurnu, would you say that the pattern changed or has it been jumbled and rearranged?
So again, the same thing, jumbled and rearranged or changed.
All right, which did take you by surprise. So you tell me that you needed a 10 minutes adjustment time to get around the new pattern and the jumble pattern, right?
Right, so because like when I started off with the paper, the first page had a passage, right? So I expected it to be a simple RC passage, and then as I turned the page, I saw more of logical questions. So it would have been better had I, just skipped over entire paper and I had familiarized myself with the assorted passages. So that would have been better.
All right. Avani.
Yes, sir. So I'd say the same thing. It took me a good 2 to 3 or 5 minutes to at least adjust to the paper, because initially you would see the first passage and you would expect a pretty simple RC and then the next RC, but then suddenly you're like, did I get the wrong paper or something?
What the hell happened? Did I get the wrong paper? Okay.
Yeah, initially.
All right. So somebody here actually felt that they got the wrong set, the wrong copy of the paper. Okay, that's funny. Yes, Avni, continue.
So you would expect an RC and then another RC, but then you're like, you can't really pick a single section to focus on, because if you've read the passage, you kind of have to attempt that, and you can't really leave a passage because there's 10 to 12 questions in one passage. So
Right.
it was you could not really divide and devote section-wise timing. It was basically you have to pick a passage and then do the questions that you thought that it were doable according to you.
And what about the difficulty level, Avni?
I'd say the English section was pretty doable, but the logical section, it was so AR based, something that we were not really expecting. We would expect AR.
Yes, that was a surprise. True.
5 or 10 questions, but most of it was AR based, so it was definitely it took a hit on all of us and the audience.
That is true. Who do we have next? Right next to Avni.
Yes, sir. My name is Ashmit, and
Yes, Ashmit. Yes. First impression.
Yes, sir. I also have a similar opinion regarding the paper. It was kind of tricky, but I would say the English section was pretty doable. If you could pick up few questions and go to that part of the passage and just do them. But when it came to logical section, you had to spend some time there, and that took most part of the 115 minutes, 90 minutes, and whereas GK was kind of easy, we were not expecting it to be that easy, but it was pretty doable. And also good part of attempt, I was able to do that.
All right. Moving on to some kids from my Mumbai center. So we are joined by Josefa. Josefa, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Josefa. So what is the sort of feedback that you would give regarding the paper?
So I think it was paradigm shifting and restrictive, because the kids didn't have kind of a choice. They had to attempt the way the paper had been given to us, for one. And the other, the pattern and the questions, it's changed. I've been solving all the papers since the last 10 years, and this has never happened.
No, of course, this was a very different pattern. Yes.
Yes, not only the pattern, sir, but also the questions in English. They have been sitters for the past, you can say 3 years. But this time it was pretty, not doable, I'd say, pretty.
All right, so this is a feedback that you're giving about the English section, where you're telling me that as compared to the papers in the past 10 years, and you tell me the questions were pretty easy, relatively speaking, the level of difficulty was higher even for the English section this year, Josefa. Is this what
Yes,
you're
sir.
telling me?
Yes, sir. The boiling down to the choice between two good options. That was something that was seen in the paper today.
All right, Josefa. All right, okay. Moving on to CP Kanpur. Who do we have from Kanpur? I can see Raj Nandini here. And okay, your screens, I think we need a bit more lighting in the room. So let's start with Kanpur. All right. So your first take, how did you, like, how much transition time did it take for you to understand the new jumbled pattern or the new rearranged pattern? Kanpur.
So honestly, I have actually planned to start with my GK section. So literally, I started with the GK section. So GK section was quite easy. So everything
Yes.
was going well. But then I just jumped to the English section. So it took me quite a lot of time to make sure my mind be that yes, GK and logical are mixed. So I thought it would be like first English, then logic, English, logic, English, logic. So it would be like that. But slowly and gradually, when we move forward to the paper, I find out that the logical is quite mixed with the English. If you reading the passage, you need to analyze what that logical also. So correlate with the both these things.
True, that is true. So I think one consensus that we all can have here is that in a paper which would only last 1 hour 30 minutes, a lot of us ended up sort of, not exactly, I wouldn't term it wasting, but you had around 10 to 15 minutes of transition time, which again, I think since that's happened to everybody will pay the cost, and it's not that just one person would pay the cost for this transition time. So I think that's a common consensus, and it will impact everybody's score, not just one person's score. All right. Moving on to CP Pitampura. Yes, Pitampura, first impressions.
The first impression was that I noticed that the pattern was different right at the start, because I opened my booklet and made sure that the pages were there. So I noticed that the passage was one, and there was the critical and English reasoning from one passage only. So I was able to adapt rather quickly. But what took me by surprise was the difficulty of the logical reasoning part. That was like really shocking, because I had to spend like around 2-3 minutes doing one question, which was a significant amount of time considering that we had 90 minutes and 150 questions. So I would say it was difficult and logical and unexpected, because I would like to cite one example that in syllogism we are usually use terms like all, not, all, no, some, not, some, but the terms that were used which were like not very easy to comprehend, because the usual preparation that we made was not very much around AR also, and that consisted a lot of AR questions, which was very surprising. 15 minutes of the paper at the initial stage of like looking at the booklet where they went into comprehending what the hell happened.
Yeah, a lot of people in the first 15 minutes were like, what the hell? As Avni says, she thought she got the wrong copy of the paper altogether. So that is pretty understandable. Moving on to the gun center. Who do we have from the Hazrat Gun Center? All right, we have some students here. All right, so now let us move on to the next part, which is the different types of questions and, how difficult or how easy did you find them? So let's start with English. Now, before we move on to the English section, I think the English and logic discussion will take place simultaneously since the passages were common. Now that you're done with the paper, tell me one good thing about the fact that from the same passage, you had a part A on English and part B on logic. Now, one feedback that I have gotten is that obviously the reading, not that the paper was not lengthy, definitely the paper was very lengthy, but from a certain set of reading, from this one set of reading, you basically had questions from both English and logic. So in a way, the reading that you had to do, was limited in the sense that, one passage would have more than 10 to 12 questions. So would you consider this, did you realize that, or are you realizing that now that maybe, the core reading that you had to do, or basically you could solve 12 questions on the basis of one set of facts, did that sort of help you in any way, or in retrospect, do you think that that was perhaps the light at the end of the tunnel in the paper? Let's start with Chandigarh. What do you feel? Now that you're done with it, do you think that was the light at the end of the tunnel in a way?
But so I think the fact that the passages were fairly easy was a good point. And but apart from that, English too was fairly easy, and it was only logical that was the bouncer. But even so, if a particular passage, the English questions were easy enough, then logic also would be fine. It's fine. What we have to do here is basically pick out the questions which we feel we can do and make that our strength. Then there will be questions which are bouncers that nobody can really do with a time limit of say 1 minute or so. So you should leave those questions and move on instead of being fixated on one passage.
All right, okay. Now coming to some of the bouncers, like apart from obviously the section being jumbled, all of you tell me that English was pretty much straightforward and expected. Some people also tell me that it was straightforward, and that is maybe because of the mocks that we'd been writing, which had quite high difficulty level questions. But some people are also telling me that if you solve the AILET papers, historically speaking, then relatively the English section was more difficult. But otherwise, it was pretty straightforward. Now coming to the sort of surprises within the section. So when I come to logic, obviously the first obvious surprise here is that you had a lot of questions on AR. So just generally tell me, while attending the logic section, which is the 70-mark section, which was the most important section, which was the most troublesome section, what are the surprises or what are the points that sort of startled you in the logic section? I'm going to start with Nityam. We have Nityam here. Nityam, yes, surprising and startling points in the logic section.
So in the logical section, like what a candidate usually expects are a lot of questions from syllogism, especially in the AILET paper, seeing the previous year questions. But I found that there were not many syllogism questions. In fact, there were barely some, and they were very tricky. Like we don't have the usual syllogism questions for practicing. It was not one of them. So this was one of the surprise which I found in the logical section.
Okay.
Also, there was no question on inference, on assumptions. There were no questions like that. Or the GMAT questions, which we were type of practicing, there were no questions like that in the logical section.
All right, okay. Moving on to Ganj, the surprising and semi-shocking things in the logic section. What did you feel? Ganj, somebody, please tell me. Azadganj Center, am I audible? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, you're audible. Please.
All right, okay, yes. Logic section, what were the surprising things that you found in the, we have Ayushi, right?
Soumya.
Soumya, yes, Soumya, tell me.
The logical section, among the first passages, the questions were specifically very tricky. They were kind of AR and maths oriented. And you had to put a lot of logic in solving those questions. I remember within the first or the second passages, there were passages related to relations, cousins and all. So questions in those just were like that way. Questions 6 to 7. And I don't think it's but as we move forward in the paper, the passages, the questions became easier, and towards the end of the paper, the passages and both the logical and English were kind of doable.
Doable. All right, okay. Moving next to the Delhi Center, who do we have from the Connaught Place Center? Karan, who do we have from the Connaught Place Center? All right, I think I have lost connection. Moving on to Pitampura. Yes. Let's start with, how did you deal with the AR part? The fact that it was a bit unexpected and surprising. Were you prepared for that? Did it catch you completely off guard? How did you deal with the section, Pitampura?
So for the most part, the AR part did catch me off guard, and instead of wasting a lot of time trying to figure the AR out, I preferred skipping the questions if I was not able to comprehend them, and that worked for me.
All right, okay. That worked or not worked is what time will tell.
Exactly.
Yeah, but at least you feel confident about it. Chandigarh, how did you tackle the AR section? The fact that there were almost 20 plus questions and you were unprepared. First, tell me if you already sort of expected something like this and you had been practicing enough AR, or did you do something at the very spur, at the very juncture in the middle of the paper to deal with it? How did you deal with this section? Can we have somebody to my right? Do we have Arshia here?
Ritika.
All right. Yes, please go ahead. Somebody.
So, sir, it was a very impromptu and spontaneous month. I did not practice that much AR. And so my approach for AR was first, so I started with English and then GK, and then the rest of the time I did logic. So within that, so I managed to complete English and GK for like within 40 minutes, 45 minutes. And then rest of the time I did logic. So I had enough time. But again, like accuracy can be a hit because I did not practice that much AR.
All right. Okay. Avni, what about you? How did you manage and tackle the AR in the section?
Sir, I'd say that basically, I did not expect at least these many questions for AR. The maximum I expected like maybe one set or two set on the very conventional topics. But this time you could see topics like coding and other topics which were not really conventional in the previous AILET papers. But with respect to the questions in the mocks and the practice mocks of CP, I was still able to solve these questions, even though maybe the accuracy or the time took a hit. But it was out of the blue according to the paper, but then at the back of my head, I had some knowledge of the concept that I could apply to the paper because of the mocks and the practice done in CP.
All right. What about you? Kanpur Center. What was your strategy to deal with analytical reasoning in the paper? Kanpur. Rajnandani, Kanpur Center, am I audible to you? Please say yes or no. Kanpur. All right. Kanpur seems to... I've lost connection with Kanpur. All right. Dhun, am I audible?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes,
There's
Dhun,
a
I
lot
can
of
hear you.
disturbance around me. I'm traveling to the center right now, so.
All right, you're traveling to the center. Okay, that's so. I'm really grateful the fact that you're still traveling and you decided to come online. So anyway, Dhun, I think I'll just wait for you to reach the center and then maybe I'll ask you a couple of questions. In the meantime,
Sure, sir, no problem.
Shore Day.
Yes, sir.
Shore, what center are you from?
Sir, I am an online student. Like I am
All right,
in Delhi.
so we
sir.
have somebody representing the online faction as well. So Shore, tell me, logic section, how did you find it? And most importantly, what was your strategy to deal with the AR questions?
So like AR was a bit unexpected that I didn't expect so many questions to come. But I had the basic idea solving mocks and doing practice thing. So that's why I was able to solve them. But accuracy, I'm not that sure.
All
but
right.
GK
Accuracy
was
is
quite
obviously
easy.
a question mark. Since you guys didn't really practice a lot, there is a question mark next to accuracy. But like keeping the accuracy part aside, were these doable questions?
Yes, sir. If not for the time factor, but they were doable.
All right. What do you feel, Josefa? Were these questions doable? Josefa, Mumbai Center.
Yes, sir. Facing some glitch, sir. Can you repeat the question?
No, I was just saying that your strategy to deal with AR and how would you rate these questions? Doable, semi-doable, and the fact that a lot of people hadn't got a lot of practice, how would you rate these questions?
Yeah, sir. So AR was definitely something different altogether. Going by the convention also, the questions we got, and pretty much we hadn't expected AR because we were expecting critical reasoning to be the predominant part.
Yes, that is what everybody felt. Yes.
Yes. So that was a very big question, sir.
All right. So, yes, Josefa, continue.
Yeah, sir. So obviously the attempts went down, sir, because couldn't attempt AR a lot of questions. So Yeah, sir.
All right, all right, all right. Okay, okay. Moving on to the next part, which is apart from AR, the remainder logic that you had gotten. Again, that also I have been told was semi-surprising because you know questions on syllogism and stuff. But whatever you got, surprising, I understand. Difficulty level of the remainder logic section. All right, and I'll start with Nitya.
So like I'll say that the remainder sections of the CR, they were not something which we were very used to, though they were doable, but they were doable, but they were not something which was very common which we were doing in our classes.
All right, all right. Yes. Soumya, Ganj, apart from the AR questions, the remainder questions that you got on logic, your take on that, difficulty level, doability and stuff.
Sir, apart from the AR question, logic this time was a bit trickier because if you see the questions from the passages that were starting, the passages was also technical and the questions they were direct from the passage. The questions we do like incident, strength and weekend, we didn't find any such questions, but the questions were entirely different. They were telling us to assume certain things and based on what you read in the passage and plus 3 to 4 assumptions, you had to derive something. So those questions I found I don't think they were doable. But towards the end of the paper, the questions in the logical became easier. They were quite doable.
All right, okay. Moving on to Pitampura. Pitampura, I've been told, Pitampura Center, one of the students tells me that they sort of did leave a lot of AR questions because they felt that was the best strategy not to waste time on something that, you were not really prepared for. But then apart from the AR questions, the other logic questions that you got, how did you feel about them and what is the sort of feeling that you have now after attempting the remainder of the questions in the logic section? Pitampura.
So apart from the AR questions, I think the rest of the questions were quite doable if you were able to manage your time well.
Alibi unexpected, doable, but a little unexpected.
Yes.
All right, okay. So this was the logic section, and I think the entire first impression thing was pretty much logic. And I mean, even before the paper, we did know that logic is going to be the most important section. There's going to be questions worth 70 marks in the logic section. And so anyway, it would have been discussed the most. But I think it is again like expected being discussed the most for other reasons. All right, not exactly because it was the most important section, but because of other reasons, which is that it was very unexpected. AR jumping out of nowhere, out of the blues, and even the CR questions, not the traditional and conventional questions that the AILET has been historically giving. All right. Moving on to GK, which was the saving grace in the paper, or maybe even the GK paper was slightly tricky, but the logic section sort of messed with your head so bad that you ended up forcing yourself to feel that the GK section was easy. So was it because logic messed your head that you found GK easy? Or was it actually easy? Let's start with Chandigarh. Ashmit. Ashmit, Chandigarh?
Yes, sir.
So GK section, your take on the GK section, what were some of the questions that you felt were out of the blues? What were the general topics covered? And like I said, are you guys forcing yourself to sort of feel that the GK section was easy because logic messed with your head, or was GK actually easy?
I felt like GK was actually easy. It was like out of 30 questions, you could easily attempt a minimum of like 18 and 20 questions are doable. We did that much practice and study also. Primarily about like the GK mentors here we have here at Clat Possible, they helped us a lot. And even like we had some prior alumni of this center like Aditya Bhaiya and Lakshya Bhaiya. They also helped us a lot when it came to like which topics we should study about and what are the primary the arenas which we should like refer about coming to GK. And I seriously felt it was like a cakewalk thing and it could be done pretty easily.
All right. Okay. So are there any topics that you remember featuring in the paper that we'd already discussed in the class? Do you remember something?
Sir, I think basically very sports oriented and climate and days. These are
Yes,
things.
sports. A lot of questions on sports. That is one feedback that I'm getting.
Yeah, and also like I initially expected AILET questions to be very maybe very frivolous questions like they usually go with. But this time I thought the GK they put was quite relevant with respect to the CLAT paper also, because this is the GK something that we could have seen in CLAT. Like the type of questions and the topics which were covered and everything. This time AILET was very like relevant questions and very recent topics, and they picked up a lot of major happenings like climate and sports, and they asked questions on that, something which was covered in our classes and our practices.
All right. So basically, they made up for the shocking logic section and tried to compensate that in the GK section. All right. Okay. What about Ganj, GK section?
So the GK section was easy. The past year papers I had seen of AILET, they were kind of detailed questions, but I think today's paper was quite superficial. It didn't cover topics in depth, but most of the topics were kind of studied in the classes and in the magazines and all. It was easy.
All right. All right. So we also have Lakshay from the Dehradun Center. Lakshay, am I audible?
Yes, sir. You are
Yes,
audible.
Lakshay. What about the GK section? We
The
all
GK
know we
was
don't
good.
want to hear
The-
about the logic section again. I think you also have the same thing to say. But
Yes, sir.
let's come to the GK section. How did you find
Sir,
the
it was
section?
good. So it was good. It was easy, and it was easy schooling.
All right, all right. Tamanna Rawat, where are you joining us from, Tamanna? Tamanna Rawat, Krish, and Astha. Could you please let us know what all cities are you joining us from?
Hi, Lubna.
Hi, Lubna. Hi.
Yeah, Dhun is here, so you can ask her. She
All
has
right,
written-
all right. Dun, hi. Welcome, Dun. Dun, so we've already gotten a general feedback of the paper and we were discussing the GK section, which a lot of people are telling me was, pretty happy-go-lucky. So your general take on the GK section and how many questions were you able to sort of get right?
I can't tell you how many I got right now,
No,
but
no,
I
of
have
course. I mean, the general idea.
exactly. But I think the GK was like a very good section for me because I started off with GK and I was like, I think this paper is so easy. Like I like this paper a lot. And then I went to the other sections and then I was
And
like,
then came the surprise.
yeah, and then the surprise came. So I think GK was nice. I think GK was really easy, not really easy, but it was very manageable, and it was not similar to the mocks that it was easier than the mocks that I attempted at CP over here. So
Easier than the mock. So that's great.
I was pretty. It was good section for me. I can say that.
And what about a quick, since you're the first person from the Mumbai Center, second apart from Muzefa, your take on the jumbled English cum logic section?
It was a shock, of course, because I had a particular idea of how I attempted mocks in general, and when it came all jumbled, I was like, I don't know how to go forward with it. But at some point, like 10 minutes into the paper, you have to get used to it. You have to say to keep.
Yes, 10 minutes is exactly the answer that I'm getting from almost everybody. 10 minutes is the standard transition time. So I think I'm going to make that pop up, once I release the official analysis, that 10 minutes transition time is the standard transition time that almost every aspirant took in order to figure out the surprising element of the logic section. All right. Moving on to the next or the last part, which is how was your testing experience? Is there something out of the blues that you would wish to mention? Were there any technical glitches that you faced? Was there any issue with the invigilator or anything? So just generally, let's start again with Chandigarh testing experience. All hunky-dory or any glitch or any issues that you had to face?
Sir, about the center, it was all right. There were no major issues we faced. They started on time and the distribution of papers was done priorly, and it was a bell rang and then we all started with it. And even the invigilators were pretty fine. There was no major issue we faced here.
No major issue from Chandigarh. What about Pitampura? Test experience. Girls, you need to chat with me, not with each other. Pitampura, how was your testing experience?
Sorry, sir. I would say that the testing experience overall.
No, any issue, any glitch, any surprising thing?
I would say that the glitch was that mostly the logical reasoning, the one we expected did not come and everything. And in GK, it was more of the thing. I would consider it a medium in spite of everyone saying easy, because GK has always been a hard subject for me because I'm not that good with remembering facts. But it was
All right.
yeah. I would say it was a medium as compared to the rest of the papers.
All right, so I'll come to the final part then. What do you think would have been good attempts? I mean, good attempts is something that you can't comment on. So let's come to how many attempts how many questions did you attempt?
I attempted 85 questions.
All right, 85. Okay, because from the sort of feedback that we are getting, we can release our initial analysis as to what would be good attempts and what are the number of questions that students generally attempted. So Pitampura tells me 85, and is that true for the both of you, around 85, 90 attempts?
So my attempts have ranged from something like 90 to 100.
90 to 100. So Pitampura, we have 85 to 90 and 90 to 100. Moving on to Ganj. Attempts.
108 I attempted. So I attempted 102.
All right. So again, I'm getting the same figure, which is anywhere between 85 to 95. All right. Next, moving on to the Mumbai Center. Attempts. Mumbai, I think we have Dhun here and we have Josefa. Could you tell me the attempts the questions number of attempts in the paper?
Sir, I think I have spoken to a lot of people who've gotten more attempts than me, so I'm thinking I'm on the lower side, but I've gotten around 115 to 117. I have, though, talked to a lot of people who've crossed 120, at least the people that I know.
No, Dhun, the usual, the answers that I'm getting, and all probably I'm going to release this in my official analysis as well, is that it's more on the lines of 90 to 95 attempts, because this was a difficult paper. So I think you're pretty bang on. You don't need to worry about, people attempting more questions. That is definitely not the case. I think 95 attempts for this paper, which was, again, out of 1 hour, 30 minutes, you almost wasted 15 minutes in understanding the paper and the shock in the paper. So yes, 85 to 95 is the answer that I'm getting generally from people. Yes. Thank you, Dhun. Chandigarh, attempts. One by one, each one of you. Chandigarh, attempts, quickly, one by one.
So, sir, I was able to attempt 118 questions pretty easily. I did English way quicker, which is why my number of attempts were a little more as compared to others.
All right, okay, next.
I think the same, around 115 or so.
All right, next.
Yes, sir. I also had like 116 to 120 attempts because I was able to manage the time very well. I had prepared a strategy as soon as I saw that the paper pattern is changed. I took 5 minutes to prepare a strategy to how to manage time. So I was able to garner a good amount of attempt.
Next.
Sir, I was also able to attempt 116 questions, considering got through the GK section pretty easily, and then kind of just had took a minute to just formulate a strategy as to how to go about the passages.
All right, okay. Moving on to Shaurya. Shaurya, how many questions could you attempt?
So I was a bit of shock after seeing the changed pattern, and I couldn't attempt more than 80 questions.
All right, so around 80 to 85 for sure. And what about Tamanna and what about Nitya?
So,
Sir, around 80 questions only.
All right, okay.
Sir, I attended close to 100 to 105.
All right, okay. So I can see that the range of attempts, the attempts are ranging from 85 to around 110 questions. And I think one consensus that we can all have is that historically speaking, plus relatively speaking, the cutoffs will be hit a little bit because of the jumble pattern. Would you agree, or do you feel that the cutoffs are going to pretty much be the same as previous years? How many of you agree with the cutoffs are going to go down this year? How many of you agree with this statement? Pitampura, it's going to be the same or it's going to come down?
It's going to come down this year, sir.
Come down. Ganj, remain the same, come down. All right. Chandigarh, remain the same or come down?
So it definitely come down this year considering the paper pattern took a hit on all of us.
Yes, that is the feeling that even I have. That is the feeling that even I have, that it is definitely going to come down. Although, I mean, 115 to 20 attempts that some of you have, made is again in line with the previous year students as well. But given the difficulty level and because of the transition time, the fact that the number of wrong questions could have gone higher, I definitely feel that the the cutoff will be lower as compared to the previous years. All right. Anyway, we will release the official analysis for all those who are attending this session outside the Clat Possible ecosystem, and for all those who are attending the session on YouTube. We're going to come up with the official analysis and the expected cutoffs and what would be a good score in each of these specific sections, which is the logic, English, and GK section, and an overall analysis of detailed analysis of each and every section. So this was the first impression. I think everybody got a fair idea. And like I said, to all my aspirants, to all my students who've joined me from different centers, you're done with the AILET, forget about it. And the AILET is always surprising. The AILET more often than not is often shocking. It's difficult and it's a great paper. I wouldn't deny that. But don't carry this baggage in the Clat paper. All right. Whatever has happened to AILET has happened. You need to forget about it. Again, if things are to be similar to what they've been like in the past 10, 15 years, the Clat paper is going to be way more standard, way more expected without a lot of bouncers. So just forget, don't carry the AILET baggage, good, bad, you would come to know eventually. Don't let that impact your Clat performance. Don't let that make you nervous before the Clat exam. That's the only piece of advice that I have for all of you. And thank you so much, all my students, from joining me from the different centers, and all my viewers on YouTube. Thank you so much for being a part of this session. Stay tuned, because very soon we'll be coming up with the detailed section-wise analysis and overall paper analysis and expected cutoffs to make it through National Law University this year. Thank you so much for joining us, all the students, and all the best for the Clat paper. All the best, guys.